Everybody, I'm not being a millennial and looking at my phone. I'm just keeping an eye on the time for today. So forgive me if I look down. So today I'm going to have a discussion about government grants and funding, and hopefully I can manage this clicker okay. So a little bit about background of me. You've had the intro. So Avant Group is a professional services firm. We specialise in helping businesses to unlock and apply for government grants and funding. We also manage the full funding life cycle for businesses. So the beauty of unlocking government grants is they are non-dilutive. So often they're grants, they're cash payments, and there's also some incentives to invest into research and development, which ties into our previous speakers' topics. So today I'm just going to talk about the landscape. So you'd be amazed at how many government grants are available at any point in time. So this gives you a bit of an idea. Just because there's 1,500 grants available doesn't mean that you're eligible for all of them. So that's the first thing to do, is always assess eligibility. When we talk about government grants, there are typically two different streams. So the first stream is what we call a competitive grant. So a competitive grant is exactly that. That's where a window is advertised, a grant opens. We've got a very discrete amount of time typically to apply for that grant. That window closes and then your application competes against everybody else's in that funding pool. So competitive grants typically are against large-scale projects. They won't fund your business's usual activities, but they will fund things such as investing into new capital investment, large-scale growth, overseas expansion, utilising Australian core skills and expertise, and just effectively growing Australian capabilities. So that's the first area. The second area that we look at, and this is really where the low-hanging fruit is the entitlement grants as well. So entitlement grants are if you are an entity of an eligible type and you undertake work of an eligible activity, then you are entitled to that funding. So at minimum, entitlement grants is a space that you definitely should be looking at because you could be leaving money on the table. The other area that our team deals with is there are actually also some government loan schemes. A lot of people are surprised to hear that. But for example, Export Finance Australia, they will provide a low document loan program as debtor financing against export contracts. So if you have a short-term need for cash flow, you can talk to Export Finance Australia, and they have a number of different programs that they can help you access, just to help with a bit of that working capital funding. So our team deals with these three key areas. The other area that we don't typically touch on is the community trusts and foundation space. So that's your not-for-profit space. Our sweet spot is STEM-based activities, research and development activities, and manufacturing. So I personally spent over a decade working in manufacturing. It's in my blood. I love manufacturing. I'm really passionate about manufacturing in Australia. So I love working with businesses like everybody here in helping them to grow their businesses, expand, invest, scale. So I had two slides here. One's Labor, one's Liberal. So I'll be skipping one. Labor, we're staying on this one. So just a bit of a snapshot. We analysed and reviewed the budget before the election campaign, and that enabled us to put this together. But just to give you a bit of an idea on the landscape over the next 3 years under a Labor government. Firstly, you all would have heard of the National Reconstruction Fund, so that will obviously continue. The NRF, though, is not a grant program. A lot of people think that it's handing out money for manufacturing. It's not. It's utilising private capital funds through superannuation funds with a mix of some government funding, and it's undertaking mostly investments. So the NRF has a remit to actually fund itself. It's not a social service fund from the federal government. It has to fund itself. So it is undertaking investments, and it will be looking to get a return on those investments. They're also looking for large-scale projects. So they're not looking for $1 million capex. They're going to be looking for, $10 to $30 to $50 million scale investments to put significant funding in and supercharge those investments. But certainly worth looking at if that's something that if you are looking at getting additional shareholders, if you're happy to have the government invest into your firm, then that's something that's worth investigating as well. There's been some additional funding provided, but realistically, the theme that we're seeing out of the Labor government is a lot of the funding is large scale, it's green, they're looking for sort of like net zero transition. The days of traditional capital co-matched grants coming out of the federal government for general manufacturing, unfortunately, is not going to exist over the next 3 years, I'll be honest with you. So that means we're not out of the water, though. There's still opportunities that are coming through from the state governments, which I can touch on shortly. You all would have heard of those modern manufacturing funds, the MMIs, those sorts of programs. They don't exist, or they don't under the budget. One large-scale grant program that does have funding is called the IGP, the Industry Growth Program or Innovation Growth Program. If you have not tapped into that or you're not aware of that, I'll just give you the quick snapshot. It is designed for businesses that have developed a new level of intellectual property. So something, in layman's terms, something cool, something sexy, like an Uber product, something that's highly scalable, and you need money to supercharge growth of that product. That's what the IGP is. It's not a capital grant. It's not a, dear government, I'm looking at investing in new CNC machining. Can you please co-contribute? That's not the fund. So the IGP will help to scale that commercialisation of new technologies and high growth firms. So if you've developed something and you do need funding to help get you out of that, they call it the valley of death on a product cycle. So if you need funding to get you out of the valley of death, it's such a terrible name, but the IGP is one that you could certainly have a look at. Various funding anywhere from 100,000 up to 5 million. So that's available. The other thing that's worth noting is, do we have anyone in the defence industry in the room today? No, okay, just a few. So defence is like it's a sweet spot. So when it comes to government funding, for obvious reasons, geopolitical reasons, the need for future capability, sovereign capability, there is a lot of defence funding. The beauty of defence funding is it continues. It opens in batches every 3 months. They close a batch, they assess it, they fund. It will fund CNC machines, CapEx investment, export investment, skilling, security upgrades, you name it. So if you're in defence, that's certainly an area that we will not see change over the next couple of years. And really, realistically, that comes from both sides of government. You do see that funding across both sides. Going to skip that slide. Don't be upset about the green. Now, this is a program, wide-ranging program that I reckon everyone in this room would be eligible for. If you haven't tapped into the EMDG, certainly worth investigating. We've unfortunately missed a cycle, but there will be a new cycle opening up in about 12 to 18 months' time where you can secure yourself a 2-year grant under this program. If you are a small business employing less than 250 staff and you have a turnover of a minimum of $100,000 in each of the 2 years prior to applying, you're eligible for an EMDG as long as you're selling an Australian product or service. Now, the Australian product, believe it or not, does not need to be made here. You just need to demonstrate that you've got enough Australian inputs into it. So if you've designed it and you're having it manufactured offshore, that typically would still be okay to get funding. You've got to have a turnover under $20 million, though. That's the only thing. The EMDG will give you 8 years of funding to help grow your business into export markets. The sorts of things that can be claimed under the EMDG, I'll touch on tiers first. So depending on where you're at on your export journey, that will depend on how much money you can attract or obtain under the EMDG funding program. So things such as tier ones for new businesses that are new to export. So you don't have to have export sales to apply for this grant, which is really good. But if you do have export sales, then you can apply for additional funding under that program. And then tier three are those that are growing into new markets. What it will cover, overseas representation. So if you want to employ someone in an offshore jurisdiction, I should also note the EMDG excludes North Korea, Russia, and New Zealand. So if you're from any of those 3 countries, then unfortunately we can't claim costs to expand into those markets. But overseas reps, marketing consultants, they can be domestic or international. Travel, so you can get a travel allowance. Unfortunately, you will be flying in the pointy end of the plane. It won't be the one at the front, though. You'll be flying at the one at the back. If you do fly at the front, you can still claim that airfare, but you've got to look for the equivalent economy class airfare in order to claim. Trade fairs, trade shows. This trade show, even though it's in Australia, still has international participation. So it would still be considered to apportion it an export activity for a business to showcase their products and services. Bringing buyers into Australia. So if you want to showcase your manufacturing plant and you pay for somebody to come into Australia, you can claim those costs. Registrations of patents and trademarks, and then also training for export development. Great program. Unfortunately, I've been banging my head on a brick wall over this one because it is underfunded. The last time they opened it, they did it on a first-in, best-dressed basis. So it was more popular than Taylor Swift tickets. The Tier 2 applications ran out in 72 minutes. So that gives you an idea of how competitive it was. They're still going through contracting at the moment, but it's all underpinned by this disastrous slide. So we had a commitment from the Liberal government to triple funding under the program, which actually would have supercharged it again. Unfortunately, with the current government, they're stabilising the budget at $110 million a year. So don't worry, I'll keep fighting the good fight and see if we can get some additional funding into this program. But you can see their normalised funding, it's just been on a great decline. So at the moment, it's only funded at 1/3 that it needs to be in order to meet current demand under the program. R&D tax incentive. How many people are accessing it, know about it, involved in it? Couple? Not many. Okay, not many hands up. Entitlement program, brilliant program, one of the most generous programs in the world. Okay, research and development tax incentive is designed to get everybody in the room here to invest into research and develop, gain skills, build new products, build new capabilities in Australia. So it's around fostering collaboration, it's investing into innovation. The R&D tax incentive is extremely generous. So what it will do is it will fund, if your turnover is under $20 million, you can get up to 43.5% cash back on R&D efforts undertaken. So I'll put that into an example. Imagine you're a startup and you haven't undertaken any, you've received no income. So you're pre-revenue and you decide to take the great leap of faith and invest into a new medical device or a new novel product that carries technical risk. It's a new to the world technology. It's got technical risk attached to it. It's got unknown outcomes. You've followed a scientific methodology with the way that you've gone about developing this new product. All the money you spend in Australia would be able to be claimed under 43.5% cash back. So that includes wages, percentage of rent, power, infrastructure costs, payroll tax, work cover, you name it, consultants, prototype fees, as long as you're going to scrap the prototype. So it is a very broad-ranging program, highly generous. If you are a normal business and you're generating revenues, then that amount that you spend on the R&D tax incentive, if you're in a tax payable position, the delta will offset against the tax liability. So it still has a good positive cash flow impact on a business. It's complex. It's actually highly complex because obviously you're interplaying here technical legislation with tax law. So I always say with R&D tax incentive, it's one that if you don't use us, make sure you use someone to give you the guidance around eligibility, because it is one person you want to keep happy is the tax man, okay? So you don't want to be subject to scrutiny. So it's about making sure that you set the project up appropriately from the start. If your turnover is above $20 million, it is non-refundable, but it is an offset. So that means if you have a tax liability, so at the end of the year, you've kicked goals, you're profitable, you're doing really well, then at the end of that year, you'll get it paid as an offset against the tax liability. If you've broken even for that year, then it will carry forward into future years, at which point you do have a tax liability. So R&D tax incentive, brilliant. If you're doing anything that you're looking to commercialise with a commercial outcome and you are investing, always worth having a look at that particular program. ESIC is one that I just wanted to touch on as well and just give a bit of an overview. If you are developing if you're developing a new product that's novel, always investigate structuring yourself as an ESIC. What an ESIC does is it means that if you set up a new company and you invest into that sort of innovative product and you go and seek external investment, it just makes you a little bit more attractive, I guess, in terms of getting funding for investors. So there's some tax breaks and tax benefits attached to it. Competitive grants overview. So as I said, we touched on the Labor Liberal policies. The themes are Liberals focusing on Liberals were manufacturing through grants. So in 3 years' time, we might see a flip on the way that the funding sits. Labor is prioritising social schemes and net zero emissions. So there's been funding allocated from the Labor government to things like large-scale regional developments, etc. Both have very distinct approaches to economic support, and the grants do differ across the two of them. Some key programs to keep an eye on. Sorry, that's really small. So I'm sorry about that. But as I mentioned, we've got the Industry Growth Program. We may see another, this is one to keep an eye on, we may see another grant coming out called the Small Business Energy Efficiency Grant. This was a brilliant program. If you're a small business under 200 employees, then you were eligible for 25 grand, no questions asked, and it was to invest into energy efficiency upgrades at your business premises. So one thing we saw a lot of manufacturers do was compressors. I had no idea how much power compressors consume. They are really hungry. So if you wanted to invest in a new compressor, that was one that was available to businesses. So that was a really good scheme. We're hoping that we'll see another round of that open up. The budget was a little bit silent on that. We're also seeing some battery investments. So battery supply chains, there's funding for that. So as I said, if you're working in the supply chain for that sort of clean energy transition, net zero transition, then you will be able to see some funding allocated across sort of those investments and those themes. But as I said, general manufacturing, typically not. So if it's just I need a machinery upgrade or something like that, not really. But if that links to enabling capabilities across these sort of priority sectors, then there's most likely going to be funding available to you. As I mentioned earlier, there is also the Export Finance Australia loan program. That's one that again, it's lending, it's not a grant, but I always put that up to let people know about it, because sometimes it's beneficial for businesses to know about different types of funding available. And then one nice, exciting initiative that's about to open soon. Are we mostly Victorian manufacturers here? Yes, a few nods, shakes. Okay, so I'll touch on Victoria and then I'll touch on some other states really quickly with 4 minutes to go. The Victorian Industry Development Fund, it's actually going to open in 2 weeks' time. So I found that out during the show this week. The nice thing about this fund is it's a grant. So and this is general manufacturing, but it's around productivity. So if you're going to invest into robotics or anything like that to help enhance productivity of the business, then this is a competitive grant that could be one that's worth investigating for your organisation. It won't be small funding, like it's not 20, 50 grand. We're looking at projects that are typically around 750K plus. The grant funding we're estimating at the moment will be around $250,000 against a $500,000 cost to the business. So 750K project, 500K from you, 250K from Victorian government. There's not as much money allocated to this as there has been in previous rounds, so it is going to be very competitive. But as Victoria comes into the 12 months leading up to the state government election, we will see some funding coming through. So this is the first one, that's the first cab off the rank. Across the other states, Queensland's very generous. So Queensland has multi-year programs that open each year. Made in Queensland grant, again, that's a CapEx grant. So if you want general manufacturing grants, state-based programs are the ones that we're looking to, unless you are sitting in those priority sectors. We do see some smaller grants coming through from New South Wales government, so there's some funding opportunities there. Western Australia also has an investment attraction fund that's open at the moment. That's about trying to bring investment into the state. So effectively, competitive grants will fund projects that are about scaling, growing your business, not business as usual. Enabling skills, coming up the sophistication curve in terms of what you're doing. If there's anything like that you've got planned, then feel free, of course, to reach out to us. That's just our general email address. If you do go onto our, If you do go onto our website, you can actually sign up for our newsletter. Also, our team is located that way. Anyway, that way. So you're welcome to come and visit us at the Avant Group stand, and we're happy to have a chat to you and see how we might be able to assist if you've got any questions. But thank you.
Please put your hands together for Kate.